The blood on the classroom floor was still fresh when Helena Kirby arrived for her first day of teaching. She stood in the doorway of Ashwood Academy's second-floor classroom, gripping her worn leather satchel with white knuckles as she surveyed the pristine space before her. The blood she'd imagined vanished in an instant, replaced by rows of antique wooden desks, tall Gothic windows that filtered the autumn morning light through crimson curtains, and a silence so complete it felt alive. Her imagination had been working overtime all morning, conjuring worst-case scenarios for her first teaching position. She'd never expected to be hired at such an exclusive private academy, especially one that catered to the children of the city's wealthiest and most reclusive families. Helena stepped inside, her sensible heels clicking against the dark hardwood. At 24, she was younger than most teachers here, fresh from her graduate program with idealistic notions about reaching difficult students. Ashwood Academy had a reputation for being unconventional, accepting only the most unique cases, children who didn't fit anywhere else. The headmistress, a severe woman with steel-gray hair named Mrs. Thorne, had been deliberately vague during the interview about what made these students so special. "They require patience, Miss Kirby," Mrs. Thorne had said, her pale hands folded on the desk between them. "And discretion. Above all else, discretion. Their families value privacy. You will not discuss what you see here with anyone outside these walls." Helena had agreed, desperate for the position. Student loans didn't pay themselves, and her cramped studio apartment in the city's oldest district was already stretching her meager savings. She'd assumed the secrecy had something to do with famous parents or political figures who wanted their troubled children kept out of the spotlight. She set her satchel on the teacher's desk and began unpacking her supplies. Lesson plans for elementary mathematics and literature, colorful markers, a selection of books she'd collected over the years. The classroom had an odd quality to it, she noticed now. Despite the windows, the light seemed muted, almost deliberately dimmed. The curtains were thick, heavy velvet that blocked most of the brightness, and the temperature was unusually cool, almost cold despite it being September. The door opened behind her, and Helena spun around with a bright smile already fixed on her face. Her smile faltered. 6 children filed into the room with an eerie silence. No chatter or shuffling of feet, just smooth, deliberate movements that seemed too coordinated for their age. They ranged from what looked like 6 to perhaps 12 years old, each dressed in the Academy's uniform, dark suits for the boys, dark dresses for the girls, all in shades of burgundy and black. But it wasn't their clothing that made Helena's breath catch. They were extraordinarily pale. Not sickly pale, but luminous like moonlight given form. Their skin held an almost translucent quality, flawless and cold-looking. And their hair, every single one of them, varied shades of white, platinum, and silver that couldn't possibly be natural. The oldest, a girl who moved with the bearing of a small aristocrat, had hair like spun starlight. The youngest, a boy who couldn't be more than 6, had white blonde curls that framed a face of such perfect beauty it was almost unsettling. But it was their eyes that truly unnerved her. Dark, ancient eyes that tracked her every movement with an intensity no child should possess. Predatory eyes. "Good morning," Helena managed, her voice only slightly strained. "Please take your seats." They moved as one, flowing into the desks with that same uncanny grace. No one spoke. They simply sat, back straight, hands folded, watching her with those penetrating stares. Helena cleared her throat and picked up her attendance sheet. "I'm Miss Kirby, and I'll be your teacher this year. I know that's a change, since Mrs. Thorne said your previous teacher had to leave suddenly due to family matters." "She ran away," the oldest girl said, her voice melodic and precise. "She was afraid of us." A nervous laugh escaped Helena. "I'm sure that's not true. Now let me take attendance. When I call your name, please say present." She glanced down at the list, blinking at the unusual names. "Lucretia Aldane, present." The silver-haired girl didn't blink. "Severine Aldane, present." Another girl, slightly younger, with the same ethereal coloring. "Dimitri Aldane, present." A boy of about 10, with sharp features and hair white as snow. The list continued. Ravenna, Dorian, and the smallest one, Lysander. All Aldanes, all siblings, apparently. Helena set down the paper and forced warmth into her smile. "Wonderful. 6 students. I think we're going to have a very productive year together. Now I thought we'd start by getting to know each other a bit. Why don't we go around and each of you tell me something about yourselves, your interests, hobbies, anything you'd like to share?" Silence greeted her suggestion. Then Lysander, the youngest, tilted his head in a movement that was distinctly bird-like. "What happens if we don't want to share?" "That's perfectly fine," Helena said quickly. "No pressure. How about I start? I grew up in a small town about 2 hours from here. I've always loved books and teaching, and I have a cat named Dickens. I love rainy days and tea, and I'm excited to be here at Ashwood." 6 pairs of eyes stared at her. No reaction, no friendly smiles or follow-up questions like she'd expected from children. Lucretia leaned back in her chair with disturbing poise. "You smell different from the other humans who work here." Helena blinked. I'm sorry, sweeter, Ravenna added, her nose lifting slightly as if scenting the air. Like flowers and fear. I'm not afraid, Helena said automatically, though her heart was beginning to race. Dimitri smiled, and that's when Helena saw them. Just for a flash, just for a moment as his lips pulled back. Fangs. Small, delicate but unmistakably sharp fangs where a child's canines should be. Her breath stopped. You are afraid, he said softly. We can hear your heartbeat from here. It's fast now, very fast. Helena gripped the edge of her desk, trying to process what she was seeing, what she was hearing. This had to be some kind of prank special effects makeup or filed teeth. Rich families sometimes had strange ideas about raising their children. Maybe this was some kind of gothic subculture thing. Those are very realistic, she said carefully. The teeth. But we have rules about costume pieces during school hours. They're not costume pieces, Severine said, sounding almost bored. We're vampires, Miss Kirby. Did Mrs. Thorne not tell you? The room tilted slightly. Helena sat down hard in her chair, gripping the armrests. That's not. Vampires aren't real. We're sitting right in front of you, Lucretia pointed out with impeccable logic. How much more real can we be? This is a joke, Helena said, more to herself than to them. Someone put you up to this. A hazing ritual for new teachers. Lysander stood up from his desk and walked toward her with that fluid grace that was becoming increasingly disturbing. He was small, cherubic, and when he opened his mouth, those delicate fangs were very visible. Would you like me to demonstrate? He asked sweetly. Stay back, Helena said, her voice shaking. Sit down, please. We don't want to hurt you, Ravenna said from her seat. Father said we're not allowed to bite the teachers anymore. That's why the last 3 left. 3? Helena whispered. Well, 2 left, Dimitri corrected. The first one had to be taken to the hospital. But she recovered. Father made sure of it. He felt very bad about the whole thing. Helena was standing now, backing toward the door, her lesson plans forgotten. I need to speak with Mrs. Thorne. She knows what we are, Lucretia said calmly. Everyone who works here knows they pay you extra for the risk. Did you not read your contract carefully? Actually, Helena hadn't. She'd been so desperate for the job, so excited by the salary they'd offered, 3 times what a normal teaching position paid. She'd skimmed it, signed it, and celebrated her good fortune. The discretion clause, Severine added helpfully. You're not allowed to tell anyone what you learn here. It's magically binding. If you try to talk about us to humans outside the academy, you'll find yourself unable to speak the words. Magic isn't real either, Helena said, but her voice lacked conviction. You're having quite a day of revelations, Lucretia observed. Perhaps you should sit down again. You look pale. Well, paler than usual for a human. Helena's hand found the doorknob behind her. I'm going to leave now, and I'm going to call someone. The police or child services, or you signed a contract. Dorian spoke for the first time, his voice deeper than his apparent age suggested. You can't leave for 30 days without forfeiting 3 months' salary and facing legal penalties. It's all there in the document you signed. Helena's mind raced back to the contract, to the clauses she'd barely glanced at, focused only on the payment structure and start date. This can't be legal, she breathed. Father employs very good lawyers, Lucretia said with a slight curve to her lips that might have been a smile. Now, are you going to teach us mathematics, or shall we continue discussing the reality of our existence? Because honestly, the mathematics sounds more interesting at this point. Helena stood frozen at the door for a long moment, her mind warring between disbelief and the evidence of her own eyes. These children, if they were children, had fangs. They moved wrong. They spoke wrong. And they claimed to be vampires as casually as other students might claim to be left-handed. Slowly, on trembling legs, she walked back to her desk. She had student loans, she had rent due in 2 weeks. And if even half of what they were saying was true, running wouldn't help anyway. Mathematics, she said faintly. Yes, let's do mathematics. Lucretia smiled fully this time, and Helena saw her fangs clearly. Excellent choice, Miss Kirby. I think you're going to survive much longer than the others. The morning passed in a surreal haze. Helena taught fractions and basic algebra to 6 vampire children who solved complex equations with bored efficiency and asked questions about compound interest rates that seemed far too advanced for their apparent ages. She learned quickly not to comment on the age discrepancy when Dimitri casually mentioned he'd been 10 years old for the past 47 years. When lunchtime arrived, the children filed out silently, leaving Helena alone in the classroom. She collapsed into her chair, her hands shaking as she pulled out her phone. She tried to call her best friend Emma, intending to quit on the spot and beg for a place to stay until she figured things out. Emma, you won't believe what's happening at this job, she started. The students are all, her throat closed. Literally closed. The words caught and died, and suddenly she couldn't breathe. She gasped, dropping the phone, clawing at her neck. As soon as she stopped trying to speak about the vampires, her throat opened again. She sucked in air, tears streaming down her face, magically binding contract. They'd been telling the truth. I see you discovered the security clause. Mrs. Thorne stood in the doorway, her severe face showing no sympathy. I did try to ensure you read everything thoroughly, Miss Kirby. You should have told me, Helena said hoarsely. You should have warned me what they were. Would you have believed me? Mrs. Thorne asked, moving into the room. Would you have taken the position? No, exactly. The Aldane children need education like any others. Their father pays exceptionally well to ensure they receive it. And you, my dear, need employment. It seemed a mutually beneficial arrangement. Helena stood up, anger overriding her fear. This is insane. They're vampires. They could hurt me. They said 3 other teachers. Those were unfortunate incidents, Mrs. Thorne interrupted. But the children were younger then, less controlled. They've matured significantly, and their father has been very clear about consequences if another teacher is harmed. They won't bite you, Miss Kirby. You're perfectly safe as long as you follow the rules. What rules? Helena demanded. Mrs. Thorne counted them off on her fingers. Don't bleed in their presence if you can help it. Don't challenge their father's authority should you ever meet him. Don't attempt to leave the academy grounds during school hours without permission. Don't invite them to cross any threshold into your home. Standard vampire precautions, really. This is insane, Helena repeated. But the words were hollow now. She was trapped. The contract, her financial situation, the magical binding that prevented her from seeking help, all of it formed a cage around her. You'll adjust, Mrs. Thorne said without warmth. The previous teacher lasted 6 months before she broke. You seem sturdier. I have faith you'll make it through the required year. A year? Helena's voice cracked. It's in your contract. After 1 year you may resign without penalty. Until then I suggest you embrace the situation. The children actually like you. Lucretia told me during lunch that you smell pleasant and explained fractions well. That's high praise from her. Mrs. Thorne left, her heels clicking down the hallway. Helena sank back into her chair and put her head in her hands. This morning she'd been excited about her new teaching position. Now she was trapped in a gothic nightmare, teaching mathematics to vampire children, whose father apparently had enough power and wealth to bind her with magical contracts. She had no choice but to continue. The afternoon was devoted to literature, and Helena discovered that vampire children had very strong opinions about classic novels, particularly ones that featured vampires. Dracula is propaganda, Lucretia declared with obvious disdain. Written by humans who were terrified of Count Vladislav and wanted to paint all vampires as monsters. Was he real? Helena asked before she could stop herself. Dracula? His real name was Vladislav Dracul, Dorian explained, and he wasn't nearly as dramatic as the book makes him seem. Father knew him, actually. Said he was rather boring and overly concerned with his appearance. Helena's hand trembled as she wrote notes on the board. Your father knew Dracula. Father is very old, Lysander said cheerfully. Older than most vampires, he's the king. Helena's chalk snapped. King of the vampires, Severine clarified, as if this should be obvious. Father rules the northern territories, has for centuries. That's why we live in the city's underground palace rather than some drafty old castle. There's an underground palace, Helena said numbly. Of course there is. You should see it, Ravenna said with the first hint of enthusiasm Helena had heard from any of them. It's beautiful. Crystal chandeliers and marble floors and a throne room with pillars that reach up into the earth itself. Father says when we're older, we'll each have our own wing. Helena set down the broken chalk and turned to face them. Let me understand this. You're the children of the vampire king. You live in an underground palace, and you attend public school? Private school, Lucretia corrected, and only 2 days a week. The rest of our education happens at home with private tutors. But Father believes we should interact with human institutions to understand the modern world. He's very progressive that way. Progressive, Helena echoed weakly. The final bell rang, a soft chime that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. The children stood in unison, gathering their books with that eerie synchronization. Will you return tomorrow, Miss Kirby? Lucretia asked, and there was something almost hopeful in her ancient eyes. Helena thought about her contract, her debts, her lack of options. I'll be here. Good, the girl said softly. We've grown tired of new teachers. It would be pleasant to keep one for more than a few months. They filed out and Helena was left alone in the dimming classroom. She packed her things slowly, trying to process everything she'd learned. Vampires were real. Magic was real. And she was contractually bound to teach the children of their king. She left the academy as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of blood and amber. The building itself was a Gothic revival mansion, all dark stone and pointed arches, nestled in the city's oldest district where narrow streets wound between buildings that predated modern urban planning. It fit perfectly with the revelation of what it housed. Helena walked to the bus stop, her mind spinning. Tomorrow she would have to come back, and the day after that. For an entire year, unless she could find a legal way out of the contract, she didn't notice the figure watching her from the academy's highest window, a silhouette against the darkening sky, Observing with interest the young teacher who had survived her first day, the week passed in a blur of surreal normalcy. Helena taught mathematics, literature, history, and science to 6 vampire children who absorbed information like sponges and occasionally made disturbing comments about historical events they'd witnessed personally. The Great Fire of London was much warmer than this classroom, Dmitri mentioned during a history lesson, though I was only 3 at the time, so my memories are hazy. Helena had stopped asking follow-up questions. Her sanity felt fragile enough without confirming that her students were centuries old. She developed a routine: arrive early, prepare lessons, teach from 9 to 3, leave quickly. The children remained polite and restrained, never threatening, though she caught them watching her with that predatory intensity when they thought she wasn't looking. Particularly when she got a paper cut one afternoon, and the entire room went still and silent until she wrapped her finger in a bandage. "We should go," Lucretia had said quickly, ushering her siblings out. "Early dismissal. Father wouldn't forgive us if we lost control." Helena had sat alone in the classroom, her heart pounding, truly understanding for the first time how much danger she was in. They were children, but they were also predators, and she was prey pretending to be their teacher. Friday afternoon, as she was packing to leave, Mrs. Thorne appeared in her doorway. "Miss Kirby, a moment please." Helena looked up, tired and emotionally drained from the strangest week of her life. "Yes? Lord Aldane wishes to meet you." Helena's blood went cold. "The Vampire King, yes. He makes a point of meeting all teachers who last more than a week with his children. Consider it an honor. He'll see you tomorrow evening at the palace." "Tomorrow is Saturday," Helena said stupidly. "I don't work weekends." "This isn't optional," Mrs. Thorne said, and there was something like pity in her eyes for the first time. "A car will collect you from your address at 8. Dress appropriately. Lord Aldane appreciates formality." She left before Helena could protest. Helena stood frozen, her bag half packed, contemplating the new nightmare awaiting her. Meeting the Vampire King, the father of her students. One of the most powerful creatures in existence, according to the children's casual comments. She went home and stared at her closet for an hour, wondering what one wore to meet a monster. The car that arrived at 8 the next evening was a sleek black vehicle that looked like it cost more than Helena's entire year of salary. The driver, a tall man with the same pale skin and dark eyes as her students, held the door open without speaking. Helena slid into the leather interior, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She'd chosen a simple black dress, modest and professional, with her dark hair pulled back in a neat bun. Her only jewelry was small pearl earrings her grandmother had given her. She felt simultaneously overdressed and completely inadequate. The drive took them into the oldest part of the city, down streets that narrowed and twisted, past buildings that dated back centuries. They stopped at what looked like an abandoned cathedral, all Gothic arches and crumbling stone. The driver opened her door and gestured toward the entrance. "Through the cathedral and down the stairs," he said, his voice like gravel. "His Majesty is expecting you." Helena forced her legs to move. The cathedral's interior was dark, lit only by candles that flickered in iron sconces. But she could see the stairs at the far end, wide marble steps descending into the earth. She walked toward them, her heels echoing in the empty space. Down she went, deeper and deeper, the temperature dropping with each step. The stairs seemed endless, spiraling down into darkness that was slowly replaced by light. A warm, golden light that grew brighter as she descended, and then she emerged into a palace. The children hadn't been exaggerating. The underground space was vast, a cavern that had been transformed into something from a fairy tale, or a nightmare depending on one's perspective. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting prismatic light across marble floors and pillars carved with intricate designs. Tapestries covered the walls, ancient and beautiful, depicting scenes of courts and battles and things Helena couldn't quite identify. And everywhere there were vampires. They moved through the space with that same fluid grace as her students, pale and beautiful and terrifying. They wore clothing that ranged from modern suits to elaborate gowns that looked centuries old. All of them turned to look at her as she descended the final steps, their dark eyes tracking her movement. Helena felt like a mouse in a den of cats. "Miss Kirby," a voice deep and resonant echoed through the chamber. "Welcome to my home." The crowd of vampires parted and Helena's breath caught. He stood before a throne of black stone, tall and commanding in a way that made every other vampire in the room seem diminished. His hair was white as snow, falling past his shoulders in a straight cascade that caught the light like silk. His skin was paler even than his children's, luminous and flawless. He wore black, a suit that was modern but cut in a way that suggested old-world elegance, with a high collar and silver accents that gleamed. But it was his face that held her attention. Sharp, aristocratic features that were almost too perfect to be real. High cheekbones, a straight nose, lips that were elegant and cruel, and his eyes, God, his eyes. They were the color of blood, Deep crimson that should have been horrifying but was somehow hypnotic. Ancient eyes that had seen centuries pass, that held power and intelligence, and something that might have been loneliness. He was the most beautiful and terrifying thing Helena had ever seen. "Approach," he commanded. And it wasn't a request. Helena's feet moved before her brain could engage. She walked across that vast marble floor, acutely aware of every vampire watching her, until she stood at the base of the throne steps. Up close, she could see he was even larger than she'd thought, well over 6 feet, with a presence that seemed to fill the entire room. "Kneel," someone hissed from the crowd, but the Vampire King raised one elegant hand. "No, she's not one of my subjects. Human customs will suffice." He looked down at Helena with those crimson eyes. "I am Phelan Aldane, king of the Northern Vampire Territories. You may call me Lord Aldane." "Helena Kirby," she managed, her voice surprisingly steady. "Your children's teacher." "Yes." He descended the steps, moving with a grace that was almost liquid. Up close, he was even more imposing, towering over her, radiating power. "You've survived a week. That's more than your predecessors managed." "I need the job," Helena said honestly. "And your children are good students, when they're not discussing the Great Fire of London from personal experience." A smile touched his lips, brief and startling. "Dimitri mentioned that lesson. He was quite pleased you didn't faint when he shared his memories." "I wanted to," Helena admitted, "but fainting seemed unprofessional." "Indeed." He circled her slowly, and she felt like prey being assessed by a predator. "You're afraid of them. Of us. Your heart is racing right now and you're breathing too quickly. Yet you return each day. Why? The contract can be broken. There are always loopholes, legal methods of escape. My lawyers are good, but they're not omnipotent. So why do you truly stay, Helena Kirby?" The use of her first name sent a shiver down her spine. She turned to track his movement, unwilling to leave her back exposed to him. "Because they're children," she said quietly. "Vampire children, but still children. They need education and stability." And because, she hesitated, then decided honesty was her only option with a creature who could probably hear every lie. "Because no one else will do it, and that seems wrong. Every child deserves a teacher who doesn't run away." Phelan stopped moving, standing directly in front of her now. He was close enough that she could feel the cold radiating from him, see the inhuman stillness of his chest that never rose with breath. He studied her face for a long moment. "You're either very brave or very foolish," he said finally. "I haven't decided which. Can I be both?" That smile again, slightly wider this time. "Perhaps." He stepped back, giving her space to breathe. "My children speak highly of you. Lucretia says you explain things clearly and don't treat them as monsters. That's rare among human teachers." "They're not monsters," Helena said, then caught herself. "I mean, they are vampires, and that's still something I'm processing, but they're also 6 children who want to learn. That's what matters in my classroom." "Your classroom," Phelan repeated, something shifting in his expression. "Yes, I suppose it is yours now." "Very well, Helena Kirby. You may continue teaching my children, but there are rules you must follow in addition to those Mrs. Thorne provided." Helena nodded, her hands clasped in front of her to hide their trembling. "You will never strike them, even in jest," Phelan said, his voice dropping to something dangerous. "You will never withhold food or water as punishment. You will never belittle them or make them feel lesser for what they are, and you will protect them from any threat that arises, human or vampire, with your life if necessary. Do you understand?" "Yes," Helena said immediately. The first 3 rules were just basic human decency. The last one was terrifying, but she understood it. These were his children, his heirs. He was trusting her with the most precious things in his immortal existence. "Good." He turned away, moving back toward his throne. "You'll be paid triple your current salary, effective immediately. Consider it hazard compensation. And you'll have access to the palace library for your lesson planning. Some of the books date back millennia and can't be found in human institutions." "That's generous," Helena managed. "I protect what is mine," Phelan said, settling back onto his throne with the ease of long practice. "And anyone who serves my children well falls under that protection. No harm will come to you while you're in my employ, Helena Kirby. You have my word as king." It should have been comforting. Instead, it made her feel claimed, like a possession he'd decided to keep safe. But she nodded, accepting what she couldn't change. "You may go," he said, waving one hand dismissively. "The driver will return you home. Classes resume Monday." Helena was halfway back to the stairs when his voice stopped her. "Miss Kirby?" She turned. He was watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for not running, for treating them with kindness. It's been a long time since anyone looked at my children and saw students rather than monsters." Helena swallowed hard. "Everyone deserves kindness, Lord Aldane, even vampires." She left before she could see his reaction, climbing those endless stairs back to the surface, back to the cathedral and the waiting car. But she felt his eyes on her the entire way, and she knew with absolute certainty that her life had just become infinitely more complicated. The Vampire King had noticed her, and she had no idea if that was a blessing or a curse. Helena didn't sleep that night. She lay in her small apartment, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of that meeting. The way Phelan had moved, like death itself given form and grace. The power that had radiated from him, making the air feel heavy. Those crimson eyes that had seemed to see straight through her. And that moment at the end, when he'd thanked her, when his voice had held something almost human, almost vulnerable. She rolled over, punching her pillow in frustration. She couldn't afford to humanize him. He was a vampire, a king, a creature that had lived for centuries and probably killed more people than she could count. The fact that he was beautiful and commanding and had actually thanked her for treating his children well didn't change what he was, but God, those eyes. Monday arrived too quickly. Helena dressed carefully, chose her lessons with extra attention, and arrived at the academy 30 minutes early. She needed to establish normalcy, routine, anything to make this feel less like a gothic novel and more like an actual teaching position. The children arrived promptly at 9, filing in with their usual eerie synchronization. But something was different. They were smiling. All 6 of them, genuine smiles that showed their fangs, but also something warmer, something almost like affection. "Father said you were brave," Lucretia announced, settling into her seat. "He said you didn't cry or faint or beg to be released from your contract. Should I have?" Helena asked wryly, pulling out her lesson plans. "The last teacher did all 3, Dorian said. It was uncomfortable. Father doesn't handle tears well." "I'll keep that in mind," Helena muttered, then raised her voice to a normal teaching tone. "Today we're going to discuss the water cycle. Can anyone tell me what evaporation means?" The day proceeded normally, or as normally as teaching vampire children could be. But Helena noticed a shift in their behavior. They were more engaged, asking questions, even laughing occasionally at her terrible science jokes. They were acting, she realized with a start, like actual children. Not the controlled 2 adult creatures from the first week, but students who felt safe enough to relax. During lunch, while the children were in the dining hall drinking whatever it was vampire children drank, Mrs. Thorne appeared. "Lord Aldane informed me of your meeting," she said without preamble. "And your new salary. Congratulations, Miss Kirby." "You've been accepted." "Accepted into what?" Helena asked. "The household, in a manner of speaking. You're under the king's protection now. That's not something he extends lightly." Mrs. Thorne's severe face softened slightly. "It also means you're no longer expendable. Other vampires will know not to touch you. That's a valuable thing in this world." "I'm still processing the existence of vampires," Helena said honestly. "The politics are a bit beyond me right now." "You'll learn quickly," Mrs. Thorne said. "You don't have a choice. But I will tell you this because someone should. Lord Aldane hasn't taken an interest in a human in decades. The fact that he personally met with you, increased your salary, and extended his protection is unusual, very unusual." Helena's stomach flipped. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying be careful, Miss Kirby. Vampire kings don't do anything without reason. He's watching you. And when a predator watches prey that closely, it's either because he intends to kill it or claim it." Mrs. Thorne left and Helena sat frozen at her desk. Claim it? What did that mean in vampire terms? She didn't want to know. She couldn't afford to know. The afternoon passed in a haze of anxiety. When the final bell rang and the children filed out, Lucretia paused at the door. "Father wants to know if you'd like access to the palace library," she said carefully. "For your lesson planning. He said you're welcome any time." "That's kind of him," Helena said, keeping her voice neutral. "But I have the internet and the public library. I should be fine." Lucretia tilted her head, studying Helena with eyes far too old for her young face. "He's trying to be welcoming. Father isn't good at it. He's been alone a long time." "We've been alone a long time. Please don't reject his offer. It would hurt him, and he's been happy since meeting you. We can tell." The plea was so unexpected, so genuinely childlike that Helena's defenses crumbled. "Tell your father I'd be honored to use the library," she said softly. "Perhaps this Saturday?" Lucretia's face lit up with a smile that transformed her from eerie to beautiful. "Yes, I'll tell him. He'll be pleased." She paused, then added, "We like you, Miss Kirby. We don't want you to leave like the others, so please don't be afraid of Father. He's intimidating, but he's good. The best father we could ask for." She left before Helena could respond, leaving her alone with her thoughts and growing confusion. She'd come here expecting troubled children and rich parents. Instead, she'd found vampire royalty, ancient creatures masquerading as students, and a king who was apparently trying to welcome her into his world. And the most terrifying part? She wasn't as frightened as she should be. Saturday evening arrived draped in autumn rain. Helena stood outside the cathedral at precisely 8, clutching a notebook and wearing jeans and a sweater because this wasn't a formal meeting, just a library visit. Just research for her lessons, nothing more. The same driver appeared, silent and efficient, and drove her through rain-slicked streets to the cathedral. This time the descent felt less frightening. The stairs were just stairs, the underground palace just a place. She could do this. But when she emerged into the vast chamber, it wasn't empty like before. Vampires moved through the space, dozens of them, conducting business or socializing or whatever it was immortal creatures did with their time, and all of them stopped to look at her. "The human teacher," someone murmured. "She has his protection," another voice whispered. "Don't even think about it." Helena kept her head high and her pace steady, though her heart was racing. She had no idea where the library was, but she wasn't about to show weakness by asking for directions. Looking for something, the voice came from directly beside her, and Helena jumped. Phelan stood there, appearing out of nowhere with that impossible vampire speed. He wore dark trousers and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, somehow managing to look both casual and regal. His crimson eyes held amusement. "The library," Helena said, recovering her composure. "Your daughter said I could access it for lesson planning. She did she?" Phelan's lips curved in what might have been a smile. "Lucretia is getting bold. But yes, you're welcome to use it. Come." He walked away, clearly expecting her to follow. Helena did, acutely aware of every vampire they passed, every predatory gaze that tracked her movement. But none approached. Phelan's presence was apparently shield enough. They walked through corridors of carved stone, past rooms filled with impossible beauty, deeper into the palace complex. Finally, Phelan pushed open a set of massive wooden doors, revealing a space that made Helena gasp. The library was enormous, a cavern filled floor to ceiling with books. Thousands upon thousands of volumes, some bound in leather, others in cloth, some so old they seemed to be held together by will alone. Ladders leaned against shelves, and comfortable reading chairs were scattered throughout. Candles and crystal lamps provided warm light that danced across the spines. Helena stepped inside, turning in a slow circle. "This is incredible." "Collected over 15 centuries, Phelan said, and there was pride in his voice. "Every book I've found valuable, beautiful, or interesting. Some are the only copies left in existence. The humans burned so many libraries over the centuries. I saved what I could." Helena moved to the nearest shelf, reading titles in languages she couldn't identify. "You've been collecting for 1,500 years? Closer to 16 now," he said casually, as if discussing a hobby rather than an incomprehensible span of time. "I was turned in what humans now call the Dark Ages. A stupid name. The period had plenty of light, just not the kind humans value." Helena pulled out a volume, handling it with careful reverence. "What's this one?" Phelan moved closer, reading over her shoulder, too close. She could feel the cold radiating from him, could smell something like winter night and old stone. "Medical text from ancient Egypt," he said softly. "They knew more about the human body than Europeans would for another 1,000 years. I acquired it from a scholar in Alexandria before the library burned." He was so close now that his breath, unnecessary but present, stirred her hair. Helena's pulse kicked up, and she knew he could hear it. "Your heart is racing again," he murmured. "Are you afraid of me, Helena?" She should say yes. Every survival instinct screamed at her to say yes, to maintain distance, to remember what he was. "No," she said instead, surprising herself. "Not afraid. Overwhelmed, maybe. Confused. But not afraid." He was silent for a long moment. Then he stepped back, giving her space. "Good. Fear is tiresome. I have enough people afraid of me." Helena turned to face him, clutching the ancient medical text. "Why did you really invite me here? It's not just about the library." Phelan regarded her with those ancient crimson eyes. Perceptive. "No, it's not just about the library." He moved away, settling into one of the reading chairs with inhuman grace. "Do you know how long it's been since someone spoke to me without fear or excessive deference?" "A long time?" Helena guessed. "Decades, centuries perhaps. Everyone wants something from a king: favor, power, protection. Or they fear me too much to speak naturally. Even my own people treat me as a thing, a position rather than a person." He gestured to the chair opposite him. "Sit, please." Helena sat, still holding the book like a shield. "Your children don't seem afraid of you." "My children are the exception. They know me as father first, king second. It's the only relationship I have that feels real anymore." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, studying her. "And then you walked into my palace, terrified but defiant, and spoke to me like I was simply a parent concerned about his children's education. Do you know how refreshing that was?" "I was just being professional," Helena said weakly. "You were being human. Genuinely, unselfconsciously human. And I realized I haven't had a real conversation in longer than I can remember." He smiled, a real smile that transformed his face from intimidating to almost warm. "So yes, I invited you here for the library. But also because I'm lonely, Helena Kirby. And you're interesting. That's a rare combination." Helena didn't know what to say. The vampire king, ancient and powerful beyond comprehension, was lonely. It should have been absurd. Instead, it was heartbreaking. "I don't know how to talk to a vampire king," she admitted. "Try talking to Phelan instead," he suggested. "No titles, no formality. Just a conversation between two people. Can you do that?" Helena looked at him, really looked at him. Past the pale skin and crimson eyes, past the predatory grace and inhuman beauty, she saw someone who had lived for 16 centuries and accumulated enough knowledge to fill this library, but who had somehow lost connection with the simple pleasure of conversation. "I can try," she said. "But you have to promise not to do that thing where you appear out of nowhere." "It's on." Phelan laughed, a rich sound that echoed through the library. "Agreed, no sudden appearances. What else? Don't circle me like prey when we talk. And maybe warn me when your eyes do that glowing thing." "My eyes don't glow," he protested. "They absolutely do. When you're focused on something, they get brighter. It's very distracting." He stared at her, then laughed again. 16 centuries, and no one has ever told me that. "Very well. I'll try to keep my intimidating mannerisms to a minimum. Anything else?" Helena set down the ancient book and met his gaze squarely. "Yes, remember that I'm human, fragile, mortal. I can't keep up with vampire speed or strength, and I have normal human needs like food and sleep and warmth. If we're going to be friends or whatever this is, you need to remember that." "Friends," Phelan repeated, testing the word. "I would like that. It's been a long time since I had a friend." They talked for hours that night. Helena forgot to check her phone, forgot about the rain outside, forgot that she was sitting in an underground palace conversing with a vampire king. They discussed books and history, teaching methods, and the challenges of raising children across centuries. Phelan told her about the fall of Rome witnessed from the shadows, about the beauty of Constantinople before the conquest, about watching the Renaissance birth new ways of thinking about the world. And Helena talked about growing up in a small town, about her love of teaching, about losing her parents in a car accident when she was 19 and having to navigate the world alone. She told him about her dreams of making a difference, of reaching students that others had given up on. "That's why you stayed," Phelan said finally, understanding dawning in his eyes. "The children others abandon. You can't walk away from them." "No," Helena agreed softly. "I can't, even when they have fangs." He smiled at that, warm and genuine. "They're lucky to have you. We're all lucky to have you." The weight of those words settled over Helena like a blanket, not threatening, just present, a truth that changed something between them. When the clock in the library chimed midnight, Helena startled. "I should go. It's late, and I have lesson planning to do tomorrow." "Of course." Phelan stood, moving to the door. "I'll have the driver take you home, but Helena, come back whenever you like. The library is yours to use freely, and He hesitated, something almost uncertain crossing his face. "I enjoy your company. If you're willing, I'd like to continue these conversations." Helena gathered her notebook and the few books he'd recommended for her lessons. "I'd like that too," Phelan. Using his name felt intimate, like crossing a threshold she couldn't uncross. But his expression, the way his eyes brightened with genuine pleasure, made it worth the risk. He walked her to the stairs, and this time his presence felt protective rather than threatening. "Be safe," he said as she began to climb. "The city at night is dangerous for humans." "I have the Vampire King's protection," Helena said with a smile. "I think I'll be fine, yes," he murmured, watching her ascend. "You will be." Helena didn't look back, but she felt his eyes on her until she reached the cathedral above, and as the car drove her home through rain-dark streets, she realized she was smiling. She was friends with a vampire king. Her life had officially become impossible to explain to anyone, but somehow she didn't mind at all. The weeks that followed fell into a rhythm that felt surreal but increasingly natural. Helena taught during the day, guiding 6 vampire children through mathematics and literature, history and science. She watched them grow more comfortable, more childlike, laughing and asking questions and occasionally arguing with each other like normal siblings. And 3 nights a week she visited the palace library. The visits always started with research for her lessons, pulling ancient texts or rare volumes that gave her insights for teaching. But they always ended with hours of conversation with Phelan. They talked about everything and nothing, debating philosophy and discussing modern politics, sharing stories and opinions. He was brilliant and funny when he relaxed, with a dry wit that made her laugh until her sides hurt. And slowly, carefully, Helena realized she was falling for him. It was in the small things. The way he always ensured there was hot tea waiting for her. Remembering she got cold in the palace's temperature-controlled air. The way he'd pull books from high shelves without being asked. Learning what subjects interested her. The way he listened when she talked, really listened, as if every word she spoke mattered. The way he looked at her sometimes, with an intensity that had nothing to do with hunger and everything to do with longing. "Tell me something you've never told anyone," Phelan said one evening. They were in the library as usual, Helena curled in her favorite chair with a cup of tea, Phelan in his chair across from her. It was late November now, almost 3 months since she'd started teaching. The palace was decorated for some vampire holiday she didn't quite understand. With dark flowers and silver candles everywhere, Helena considered the question. "I'm afraid of dying alone," she said finally. Not death itself, but the loneliness of it. Dying in some apartment with no one to notice until the rent is overdue. Phelan's expression tightened. That won't happen to you. You don't know that. Yes, I do. He leaned forward, his crimson eyes intense. You're under my protection, Helena. If anything threatens you, if you're ever in danger or alone or afraid, I will know. I will come for you. That's not an empty promise. Helena's heart stuttered. Phelan, I care about you, he said bluntly. More than I've cared about anyone in centuries who wasn't my children. You've become important to me. I need you to understand that. The air between them felt charged, electric. Helena set down her tea with shaking hands. You're a vampire king. I'm a human teacher. We're not exactly compassion. Phelan stood, moving to the window that looked out over the underground palace grounds. No, we're not. You'll age and die while I remain unchanged. You need sunlight and warmth and things I can't provide. Any relationship between us would be complicated at best, impossible at worst. Then why tell me? Helena asked, standing as well. Why make this harder than it already is? He turned to face her and his expression was raw with something she'd never seen before. Vulnerability, because I'm selfish, because I've spent 16 centuries being practical and careful and doing what's best for my people, and for once I want something just for myself. And what I want is you. Helena's breath caught. She should run, should maintain professional distance, should remember all the reasons this was impossible. Instead, she crossed the library and stood before him, looking up into those ancient crimson eyes. I'm going to age, she said softly. I'm going to get wrinkles and gray hair. I'm going to get sick and eventually die. Can you handle watching that happen? I don't know, Phelan said honestly. But I know that the thought of not having you in my life, of going back to the loneliness I felt before you came, is worse than any future pain. I'll never fit into your world, Helena continued. I'm human, mortal. Your people already look at me like I'm an oddity. If we're together, that will only get worse. Let them look, Phelan said fiercely. I'm the king. My approval is the only one that matters. Your children adore you. They ask about you constantly. Lucretia told me last week that she wants you to stay forever. Lysander asked if you could live in the palace. Helena's eyes stung with tears. This is insane, yes. Phelan agreed. Completely insane. A vampire king and a human teacher. It violates every practical consideration. But Helena, I haven't felt this alive in centuries. You've reminded me what it means to connect with someone, to care about their thoughts and opinions and whether they're happy. I don't want to lose that. I don't want to lose you. Helena reached up, her hand trembling, and touched his face. His skin was cold as marble, smooth and perfect. He didn't breathe, didn't blink, but she felt him lean into her touch like a man starved for affection. I'm falling in love with you, she whispered, and that terrifies me. Phelan's eyes blazed bright crimson. I fell in love with you weeks ago, when you explained fractions to Dmitri with such patience even though you were still afraid of us. When you stood in my throne room and spoke to me like I was just a concerned father rather than a monster. I've been lost since then. He pulled her close and Helena went willingly, wrapping her arms around him despite the cold. He was solid and strong, and when he held her she felt safer than she'd ever felt in her life. What do we do now? She asked against his chest. Whatever we want, Phelan murmured into her hair. We're both adults, this is our choice. But Helena, you need to understand what you're agreeing to. A relationship with me will be complicated. Dangerous sometimes. My world isn't gentle. I figured that out when I learned vampires were real, Helena said dryly. But Phelan, I think you're worth the complication. He pulled back enough to look at her, his expression soft in a way she'd never seen. May I kiss you? Please, Helena breathed. He kissed her carefully, gently, as if she were something precious he was afraid to break. His lips were cold but soft, moving against hers with centuries of experience but also a tenderness that made her heart ache. She melted into him, into the kiss, into the impossibility of this moment. When they finally broke apart, both of them were trembling. Well, Helena said, slightly dazed, that was inadequate, Phelan finished. I've wanted to do that for weeks. Once isn't nearly enough. He kissed her again, deeper this time, his arms wrapping around her fully. Helena felt claimed and treasured all at once, safe in the embrace of a creature who could kill her with ease but held her like she was his most valued possession. They spent the rest of the evening in the library, talking and kissing and making plans for a relationship that shouldn't work but somehow felt right. When Phelan's driver took Helena home in the early morning hours, she was exhausted and overwhelmed and happier than she'd been in years. She was in love with the vampire king. And he loved her back. It should have been the end of the story, the happy conclusion. But as Helena would soon learn, in the vampire world, falling in love was only the beginning of the complications. The next few weeks were blissful and strange in equal measure. Helena continued teaching, but now the children knew something had shifted. Lucretia watched her with knowing eyes, and Lysander started calling her almost mother before being gently corrected by his siblings. And every night Helena went to the palace. Sometimes she and Phelan stayed in the library, reading together or talking. Sometimes he took her on tours of the vast underground complex, showing her treasures he'd collected over centuries, art and artifacts that belonged in museums. Sometimes they simply sat together in his private chambers, a space of dark elegance and surprising comfort, and existed in each other's presence. He was careful with her always, mindful of his strength and her fragility, but he was also passionate, affectionate in ways that surprised her. He held her hand when they walked, kissed her forehead when she was tired, pulled her into his lap when they talked. For a creature who claimed to be out of practice with relationships, he was remarkably attentive. "I'm just remembering," he told her one night when she commented on it. "It's been so long since I had someone to care for like this, I'd forgotten how good it feels." But their happiness couldn't exist in a vacuum. The vampire court was noticing, and not everyone was pleased. Helena was leaving the academy one Friday evening when a figure stepped out of the shadows. Pale skin, dark eyes, but not anyone she recognized. Male, tall, dressed in expensive clothing, and his fangs were visible as he smiled. "The human teacher," he said, his voice smooth and cold. "The king's new pet." Helena backed toward the academy entrance. "I don't know you, no, but I know you. Everyone in the court knows you now. The mortal who has caught our king's attention. Who dares to presume she could be more than a passing fancy?" "I'm not presuming anything," Helena said, trying to keep her voice steady. "And I'm under Lord Aldane's protection, so I suggest you leave." "His protection?" the vampire laughed. "Yes, that's the problem, isn't it? Our king, distracted by a human, growing soft, forgetting his duties in favor of spending nights in the library with fragile mortal flesh." He moved closer too fast, and Helena pressed against the academy doors. "Stay back, or what? You'll scream? You'll call for help? There's no one here to save you, little teacher. And I think it's time someone reminded our king that humans are food, not companions." His hand shot out, grabbing her wrist with crushing force. Helena cried out, pain lancing up her arm. He pulled her close, his fangs descending fully, aimed at her throat. "Unhand her now." The voice was death itself given sound. The vampire froze, his eyes widening in genuine terror. He released Helena immediately, stumbling backward. Phelan stood behind them, materialized from nothing, his expression carved from ice and fury. His eyes blazed crimson fire, and the temperature dropped so fast Helena could see her breath. "My lord," the vampire stammered. "I was just threatening what's mine," Phelan finished, his voice soft and infinitely dangerous. "Touching what's mine. Attempting to harm what I've claimed and protected." He moved between Helena and the other vampire, a living wall of rage. "You know the law, Cassius. Harming one under royal protection is a death sentence." "I didn't harm her," Cassius protested. "Just frightened her a bit. To prove she doesn't belong in our world." "She belongs exactly where I say she belongs," Phelan said, and power radiated from him, making the air shimmer. "And right now, that's under my protection and in my life. You will never approach her again. You will never speak to her, look at her, or think about harming her. If you do, I will make your death last weeks. Am I understood?" "Yes, my king," Cassius whispered, pale with terror. "I understand. Good. Now leave my sight before I change my mind about being merciful." The vampire fled, disappearing into the night. The moment he was gone, Phelan turned to Helena, his expression transforming from fury to concern. "Are you hurt? Let me see your wrist." Helena held out her arm, already bruising where Cassius had grabbed her. Phelan took her hand with infinite gentleness, examining the injury, his jaw tight with suppressed rage. "I'll kill him," he said quietly. "I should have ended him immediately." "No," Helena said, her voice shaking. "He's right in a way. I don't belong in your world. This is going to keep happening, isn't it? Other vampires who think I'm a distraction or a weakness. Let them think what they want," Phelan said fiercely. "I'll protect you from all of them." "You can't be with me every moment," Helena argued, "and I can't live in fear, waiting for the next vampire who decides to prove a point." "Phelan, maybe we need to reconsider this. Maybe it's too dangerous." His expression crumbled, and for a moment he looked genuinely devastated. Then his features hardened, resolve settling over him. "No," he said firmly. "No, we're not giving up because one fool decided to make a point. Helena, I love you. That's not something I say lightly. I've lived 16 centuries, and I've loved perhaps 3 people in all that time. You're one of them. I'm not losing you because of threats. But I'll make you safe," he continued, his mind clearly racing. "There are ways, old ways, magic that can protect you even when I'm not present." Helena blinked. "Magic? You've already experienced it with the contract," Phelan reminded her. "Magic exists, woven through the vampire world, and there are spells, protections that can be placed on a person. They're difficult and expensive, but I have resources. I'll hire the best witch in the Northern Territories to craft protections for you. Anyone who tries to harm you will suffer immediate consequences." "That's really possible?" Helena asked, hope warring with disbelief. "Yes. It will take time to arrange, but yes." He pulled her close, careful of her injured wrist. "I will not let you go, Helena. Not unless you truly want to leave. Do you? Do you want to walk away from this from us?" Helena thought about the past months, the joy of teaching his children, the wonder of the library, the hours spent talking with Phelan about everything and nothing, the way he looked at her like she was precious, the way she felt when he held her safe and valued and loved. "No," she whispered. "I don't want to leave, I'm just scared." "Then let me make you safe," Phelan said gently. "Let me protect you properly, and in the meantime, I'll make it known throughout the court that anyone who touches you will face my full wrath. That should deter most would be threats." Helena nodded against his chest. "Okay. But Phelan, this has to be a partnership. I can't be just someone you protect. I need to have some agency, some way to defend myself." He pulled back, considering her seriously. "Would you accept self-defense training? I can't teach you to fight vampires, you're too fragile for that. But there are techniques, ways to escape or call for help, and once you have magical protection, that will help significantly." "Yes," Helena said immediately. "I want to learn. I don't want to be helpless." "You're not helpless," Phelan said, a slight smile touching his lips. "You're teaching my children things I couldn't. You're making me feel human emotions I'd forgotten existed. You're one of the strongest people I've ever met, Helena. Never think otherwise." He kissed her then, gentle and reassuring, and Helena let herself relax into it. They would figure this out. They had to, because giving up on this, on him, on what they'd found together, wasn't an option she could bear to consider. The next day, Phelan kept his promise. Helena was teaching afternoon literature when Mrs. Thorne interrupted, her face pale with shock. "Miss Kirby, Lord Aldane has requested your presence in the main hall immediately." Helena exchanged confused glances with her students, but Lucretia was smiling, a knowing expression on her young face. "Father's making a statement," she said confidently. "This should be interesting." Helena followed Mrs. Thorne to the Academy's main hall, a vast space used for assemblies and special events. But today it was filled with vampires. Dozens of them, members of the court she recognized from the palace, all standing in careful positions of deference. And at the front, standing before the assembled crowd, was Phelan. He wore full royal regalia today, something she'd never seen before. Black and silver, with a crown of dark metal that seemed to absorb light. He looked every inch the king, powerful and commanding and absolutely terrifying. His eyes found hers immediately, and he extended one hand. "Come here, Helena." She walked forward on trembling legs, acutely aware of every vampire watching. When she reached Phelan, he took her hand and drew her to his side, facing the assembled court. "You all know who this is," he said, his voice carrying effortlessly through the space. "Helena Kirby, teacher to my children, and now, formally under my protection as my acknowledged companion." A ripple went through the crowd. Helena's breath caught. Companion. She didn't know exactly what that meant in vampire terms, but it sounded significant. "Any vampire who harms her, threatens her, or attempts to use her against me will face execution," Phelan continued coldly. "No trial, no mercy, immediate death. She is mine to protect, and I will tolerate no disrespect toward her. Is that understood?" "Yes, my lord," the assembled vampires chorused. "Furthermore," Phelan said, and now his voice softened slightly, "I expect her to be treated with the courtesy due to any member of my household. She will have access to palace grounds, to court functions if she wishes, and to all protections afforded to my family. Anyone who has a problem with this may leave my service immediately." Silence. No one moved. "Good." Phelan looked down at Helena, his expression warming. "I apologize for not consulting you first, but I wanted the announcement made quickly. For your safety." Helena squeezed his hand, understanding what he'd done. He'd claimed her publicly, put the full weight of his authority behind protecting her. Any vampire who threatened her now would be directly defying their king. "Thank you," she whispered. He raised her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles in a gesture that was both courtly and possessive. "You're welcome now. Go back to teaching my children. We'll talk more tonight." Helena returned to her classroom in a daze, the stares of vampires following her the entire way. When she entered, all 6 children were grinning. "Father really does love you," Ravenna said happily. That was a formal acknowledgement. "It means you're family now." "Family?" Helena echoed. "Not officially married or bonded," Lucretia clarified, "but under his protection as if you were blood-related. It's a big deal. No one can touch you now without facing his wrath." Lysander bounced in his seat. "Does this mean you'll come to family dinners? We have them once a week, and they're usually boring, but you'd make them better." Helena laughed, overwhelmed but also strangely touched. Yes, I suppose I could come to family dinners." The children cheered, and for the rest of the afternoon, Helena taught with a lightness in her heart she hadn't felt since Cassius's threat. Phelan had protected her. He'd claimed her in front of his entire court. He was serious about this, about them. And Helena realized she was ready to be serious too. That night, when she arrived at the palace, Phelan was waiting for her at the bottom of the cathedral stairs. He'd changed into more casual clothing, but he still looked regal, powerful. When she reached him, he pulled her into his arms without hesitation. "I should have asked first," he said quietly. before making such a public statement. But when I heard about Cassius, when I saw your bruised wrist, something in me snapped. I needed everyone to know you're under my protection." "I'm not angry," Helena assured him. "Surprised but not angry." "Your children explained what it means." "I'm honored, actually." He pulled back to look at her, studying her face. "You're taking all of this remarkably well. Most humans would have run screaming by now." "I'm not most humans," Helena said with a smile. "And besides, I'm in love with you. That makes tolerating vampire politics somewhat easier." "In love with me," Phelan repeated, his expression softening. "Say it again." "I love you," Helena said clearly. "All of you. The king, the father, the lonely man who collects books and remembers empires. I love you, Phelan." He kissed her then, deep and passionate, right there at the bottom of the stairs with his court potentially watching. And Helena didn't care, kissing him back with everything she felt. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard despite only one of them needing air, Phelan rested his forehead against hers. "I have something for you," he said. "Come with me." He led her through the palace to his private chambers, a space she'd only been in a few times. They were elegant and comfortable, with modern amenities mixed with ancient furniture. He guided her to the sitting area and pulled a small box from his pocket. "This isn't an engagement ring," he said quickly. "We're not ready for that conversation yet, but it's a promise, and it carries magical protection until I can arrange stronger wards." Helena opened the box to reveal a ring of dark metal, twisted in elegant knots, with a crimson stone set in the center. "It's beautiful," she breathed. "The stone is vampire bloodstone," Phelan explained, "rare and magically potent. While you wear it, you'll have basic protection against vampire compulsion and enhanced strength. It's not much, but it will help until better protections can be arranged." He took the ring and slid it onto her right hand. It fit perfectly, the metal warm against her skin. "How did you know my size?" Helena asked. "I'm observant," Phelan said with a slight smile, "and I may have borrowed one of your other rings briefly to have this sized." Helena laughed, then threw her arms around him. "Thank you for everything, for protecting me, for loving me, for being patient while I figure out how to exist in your world." "Thank you," Phelan countered, "for entering my world at all, for seeing past what I am to who I am, for loving my children and tolerating my court and staying when any sane person would have run." They spent the rest of the evening together, talking about the future and making plans. Phelan explained more about vampire society, about the protections he was arranging, about what being his acknowledged companion would mean in practical terms. And Helena talked about her hopes for the children's education, about lesson plans and dreams of helping them integrate into both vampire and human worlds. It was domestic and strange and perfect. When Phelan's driver took Helena home in the early morning hours, she was exhausted but happy. She looked at the ring on her finger, the proof of his promise, and smiled. They were making this work. Against all odds, against all logic, they were building something real. And Helena had never felt more certain about anything in her life. The months that followed were perhaps the happiest of Helena's life. She settled into her role as teacher and companion, navigating both worlds with increasing confidence. The vampire children bloomed under her care, becoming more open and playful, their ancient eyes sparkling with genuine childhood joy. And her relationship with Phelan deepened into something profound. They established routines together. Family dinners every Wednesday, where Helena would join Phelan and his children for meals in the palace's private dining room. The children would talk about their week, about their lessons and interests, and Phelan would listen with the focused attention of a devoted father. Helena would add her own observations about their progress, and together they'd guide 6 vampire children through the complexities of growing up immortal. Weekend mornings, Helena would come to the palace and they'd spend hours in the library, reading together or researching topics for her lessons. Phelan proved to be an invaluable resource, with his centuries of accumulated knowledge and his vast collection of texts, and the evenings, those were theirs alone. Sometimes they'd walk through the underground gardens, spaces carved from stone and filled with night-blooming flowers that thrived without sunlight. Sometimes they'd sit in his chambers and simply talk, sharing stories and dreams, and sometimes they'd do nothing but hold each other, finding comfort in physical closeness. Phelan was an attentive partner, always mindful of her needs. He kept her favorite tea stocked in his chambers, maintained comfortable temperatures in the spaces they shared, and arranged for human food to be available whenever she visited. He learned her moods and preferences, adapting his ancient sensibilities to accommodate her modern ones. And Helena learned him in return. She discovered he was secretly sentimental, keeping mementos from throughout his long life hidden in drawers and shelves. She learned he had a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard and made her laugh. She found out he loved music but rarely played the piano in his study because it reminded him of losses long past. "Play for me," she asked one evening, finding him staring at the instrument with longing. "I'm out of practice," he protested. I don't care, I want to hear you play. So he did, and the music that flowed from his fingers was ancient and beautiful, melodies from centuries past woven with modern sensibilities. Helena sat and listened, tears streaming down her face at the beauty of it, at this glimpse into his soul. Afterward he held her while she cried, understanding without words why the music had moved her so deeply. I'll play for you whenever you like, he murmured into her hair. If it makes you happy, everything about you makes me happy, Helena whispered back. But happiness, as she was learning, never existed without complications. It was February, 6 months after she'd started teaching, when the witch arrived. Helena was in the library, grading papers while Phelan read beside her, when a knock sounded at the door. Unusual, since most vampires simply entered without announcement. Come, Phelan called. The woman who entered was striking in a way that had nothing to do with conventional beauty. She was older, perhaps 50, with silver-streaked dark hair and eyes that seemed to see through surfaces to the truth beneath. She wore practical clothing, jeans and a sweater, but she moved with the confidence of someone comfortable with power. Lord Aldane, she said with a nod. I'm Margot Thorne. You requested my services? Phelan stood immediately. The witch, yes, thank you for coming. This is Helena, the one who needs protection. Margot turned her penetrating gaze on Helena, who felt immediately exposed, as if the witch was cataloging every secret she'd ever kept. The human who captured a king's heart, Margot said thoughtfully. Interesting. You're braver than you look. I get that a lot lately, Helena said dryly. Margot smiled, the first warmth in her expression. I like you. Good. This will be easier if I like you. She turned back to Phelan. You want full protection? Against vampire attacks, compulsion, magical assault? Everything, Phelan said firmly. Price is no object. It will be significant, Margot warned. Protections this comprehensive require rare materials and considerable power. We're talking about making a human essentially vampire-proof. That's not simple magic. I don't care about the cost, Phelan said. Name your price. They negotiated while Helena watched, discussing magical theory and payment in terms she barely understood. Finally, Margot nodded. I'll need 3 days to gather materials and prepare the spell work. Then Helena will need to come to my workshop for the actual ritual. It will take several hours and will be physically draining for her. I'll be there, Helena said immediately. Margot studied her again. You understand what this means. These protections will mark you as other in the human world. Sensitive individuals will sense the magic on you. And once the protections are in place, they can't be easily removed. You'll carry this magic for the rest of your life. Helena looked at Phelan, at the concern and hope warring in his expression, then back at Margot. I understand, she said firmly. Do it. 3 days later, Helena found herself in Margot's workshop, a space carved out of the palace's lower levels that smelled of herbs and incense. The witch had drawn intricate symbols on the floor in what looked like silver paint, and candles burned in careful arrangements around the circle. Strip to undergarments and stand in the center, Margot instructed. Phelan, you'll need to provide a blood offering. Your blood will key the protections to recognize you and yours as safe. Helena undressed with shaking hands, acutely aware of Phelan, watching with concern. She stepped into the circle, the floor cold beneath her bare feet. Margot began to chant in a language Helena didn't recognize, moving around the circle and sprinkling powders that sparked and smoked when they hit the candle flames. The air grew thick with power, making it hard to breathe. Your hand, Margot said to Phelan. He offered his palm without hesitation. Margot drew a silver knife across it, and dark red blood welled up. She caught it in a crystal bowl, then brought it to Helena. Drink, she instructed. Just a sip. It will bind the protections to recognize him. Helena took the bowl with trembling hands. Vampire blood. She'd never thought she'd be in this position. But she trusted Phelan, trusted that this was necessary. She drank, and the blood was cold and strange on her tongue. Tasting of metal and winter nights, power exploded through her. Helena gasped, nearly dropping the bowl. It felt like lightning coursing through her veins, burning and building and changing something fundamental in her nature. Margot steadied her, taking back the bowl, still chanting. The ritual lasted hours. Helena stood in the circle while Margot worked her magic, weaving protections into Helena's very essence. By the end, Helena was shaking with exhaustion, barely able to stand. It's done, Margot said finally, and the power in the air dissipated. She's protected. Any vampire who tries to harm her will suffer immediate backlash, pain that will incapacitate them long enough for her to escape. She can't be compelled, can't be tracked magically, and she'll have enhanced strength and healing for a human. Not vampire level, but enough to give her an edge. Phelan was at Helena's side immediately, catching her as her legs gave out. You're sure it worked? Test it yourself, Margot suggested. Try to compel her to do something harmless. Phelan looked into Helena's eyes, and she felt the push of his will, something she'd never experienced before. It was like a gentle pressure against her mind, urging her to sit down, but it slid off, unable to gain purchase. Helena remained standing, supported by Phelan's arms. It works, he breathed, relief flooding his expression. Thank you, Margot. Your payment will be transferred immediately. The witch nodded and began packing up her materials. Take care of her, Lord Aldane. What you two have is rare. Don't waste it. I won't, Phelan promised. He carried Helena to his chambers, laying her gently on his bed and covering her with blankets. She was cold and exhausted, barely able to keep her eyes open. Sleep, he murmured, stroking her hair. I'll stay with you. Thank you, Helena whispered. For protecting me always, Phelan said softly. I will always protect you, Helena. You're mine, and I protect what's mine. Helena fell asleep to the sound of his voice, to the cold comfort of his presence, and she felt safer than she'd ever felt in her life. When she woke hours later, it was to find Phelan still beside her, reading a book while keeping watch. He looked up immediately when she stirred. How do you feel? Helena took stock of herself. Tired but also different somehow. Stronger. Good, actually. Strange, but good. The magic is settling into your system, Phelan explained. Margot said you might feel odd for a few days while your body adjusts. But you're safe now, Helena. Truly safe. She reached for him, pulling him down beside her on the bed. He came willingly, wrapping around her despite the temperature difference between his cold body and her warm one. I love you, Helena said simply. Thank you for going to such lengths to keep me safe. I would do anything for you, Phelan said seriously. Anything, Helena. Never doubt that. They lay together in comfortable silence, and Helena felt the truth of his words settle into her bones. He loved her, he would protect her, and she was finally, truly safe in this strange world she'd entered. The rest of the school year passed in a blur of happiness. Spring arrived, though it was hard to tell in the underground palace where eternal night reigned. But above ground, where Helena lived and taught, the world bloomed with new life. The children's education progressed beautifully. Lucretia was reading at a high school level, devouring books from the palace library and discussing them with Helena in their private sessions. Dmitri showed a talent for mathematics that had him solving calculus problems for fun. Ravenna discovered a love for art, filling sketchbooks with beautiful drawings. Severine mastered 3 languages and was working on a 4th. Dorian developed an interest in history, particularly military strategy. And little Lysander, the youngest, proved to have a gift for music, playing piano pieces that left Helena in tears. They were thriving, and Helena took deep pride in her role in their growth. And her relationship with Phelan continued to deepen. They were partners now in every sense, discussing the children's education, palace business, the challenges of ruling vampire territories in a modern world. He valued her opinion, often asking for her perspective on matters that affected both humans and vampires. You see things I miss, he told her one evening. I've been alive so long that I forget what it's like to be mortal, to have limited time and urgent needs. You remind me to consider the human perspective. Helena had become a fixture at court functions, standing beside Phelan at formal events, dressed in gowns he'd made for her. The vampires had accepted her presence, though some still regarded her with suspicion. But none dared threaten her, not with the magical protections and Phelan's very public claim on her. She'd even made friends among the court. Lady Seraphine, an ancient vampire who'd been turned in ancient Greece, took a liking to Helena and often invited her for tea. Lord Marcus, Phelan's second in command, treated her with respectful courtesy and occasionally asked her advice on modern human customs. Helena's life had become something she never could have imagined 6 months ago. She was living between 2 worlds, human and vampire, and somehow making it work. But as June approached and the school year neared its end, Helena found herself facing a decision. My contract is almost up, she told Phelan one evening. They were in the garden, walking among the night-blooming flowers. I've fulfilled my year obligation. I could leave now if I wanted. Phelan stopped walking, his expression carefully neutral. Do you want to leave? No, Helena said immediately. But I want to renegotiate my contract. I want to live here in the palace at least part-time. Commuting is exhausting and I miss you during the days. I want to be closer to you and the children. Relief flooded Phelan's face. You want to move in? Partially, Helena clarified. I'd like to keep my apartment for now, maintain some connection to the human world. But yes, I'd like to have a room here to stay most nights, to be part of this household properly. Yes, Phelan said immediately, pulling her into his arms. God, yes, Helena, I've wanted to ask but didn't want to pressure you. You can have an entire wing if you want. Whatever would make you comfortable. Helena laughed against his chest. A bedroom is fine, preferably close to yours, next to mine, Phelan said firmly. With a connecting door so I can reach you easily if you need anything. They made plans that night, discussing practical matters like furniture and how to transport her belongings. But beneath the logistics was a deeper truth. They were building a life together. Not just a relationship, but a genuine partnership that would span both their worlds. The last day of the school year arrived, and Helena felt oddly emotional. She'd survived her first year teaching vampire children, something she never could have imagined when she took this job. The children had grown and learned, and she'd fallen in love with their father. It was the strangest, most wonderful year of her life. The children gave her gifts. Drawings and essays, a book of poems Severine had written, a mathematics proof Dmitri had worked on for weeks. Lucretia gave her a necklace, a silver pendant in the shape of a crescent moon. "It belonged to our mother," Lucretia said quietly. "She died centuries ago before I was turned. Father keeps her things, but I think she'd want you to have this. You're the closest thing to a mother we've had in a very long time." Helena accepted the necklace with tears in her eyes, understanding the significance of the gift. "I'm honored, thank you." After the children left for the day, Phelan appeared in her classroom. He'd been there for the gift-giving, standing in the back and watching with soft eyes. "Ready to go home?" he asked. "Home, the palace," Helena smiled. "Yes, let's go home." Moving into the palace was easier than Helena expected. Phelan had furnished a bedroom for her next to his chambers, decorating it with warm colors and comfortable furniture that somehow complemented the Gothic elegance of the palace. There was a large bed with soft blankets, a reading nook with a window that opened to the underground gardens, a desk for her lesson planning, and shelves already stocked with her favorite books. "You thought of everything," Helena said, moved by his attention to detail. "I want you to be happy here," Phelan said simply. "This is your home now, Helena. Make any changes you want." The connecting door between their rooms was left open, a clear invitation. And that first night, Helena fell asleep in Phelan's bed, wrapped in his arms, feeling more at home than she'd felt anywhere. The summer passed in blissful domesticity. Helena spent her days preparing for the next school year, reading in the library and helping Phelan with various administrative tasks. She learned more about vampire politics and law, offering her perspective on policies that affected both humans and vampires. And the evenings were theirs, spent together or with the children, building the family dynamics that had been missing from all their lives. But as autumn approached and the new school year loomed, Helena found herself thinking about the future in more concrete terms. She and Phelan had been together for almost a year now. She was living in his palace, helping raise his children, integral to his life. But they hadn't discussed the next steps, the bigger questions. She decided to broach the subject one evening in late August. They were in his study, Helena reading while Phelan worked on correspondence. The room was quiet and comfortable, lit by soft lamps and candles. "Phelan," Helena said, setting down her book, "we need to talk about the future." He looked up immediately, concern flickering across his face. "That sounds ominous." "Not ominous," Helena assured him. "Just practical. We've been together almost a year. I'm living here. I'm part of your household. But we haven't talked about where this is going long term." Phelan set down his pen, giving her his full attention. "What do you want to talk about?" Helena took a deep breath. "Marriage. Children of our own, possibly. What happens as I age and you don't? The big questions, Phelan. I need to know what you're thinking about our future." He was quiet for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. Then he stood and came to sit beside her, taking her hands in his. "I want to marry you," he said simply. "I've wanted to for months, but I was afraid to push. I know marriage is complicated for us, given that I'm immortal and you're not. But Helena, I want you to be my wife in every sense. I want the world to know you're mine and I'm yours." Helena's heart soared. "I want that too." "As for children," Phelan continued carefully, "that's more complicated. I can't father children in the traditional sense. Vampires can't reproduce that way. But there are options, adoption if you want children. Or," he hesitated, "or turning." Helena stilled. "Turning? You mean making me a vampire?" "It's an option," Phelan said quietly. "Not one to be taken lightly. But if you wanted to stay with me forever, to live as long as I do, it's possible. You would be a vampire with all the strengths and weaknesses that entails. You'd never see the sun again, would need to drink blood to survive, would live apart from the human world in many ways. But I'd be with you," Helena said slowly, processing the idea. "Forever, forever," Phelan confirmed. "Or until one of us is killed, which is the only way vampires truly die. But yes, potentially forever. It's your choice, Helena. I will love you either way, for however long we have. But if you want immortality, I can give you that." Helena stood, pacing the study as she thought, becoming a vampire, leaving behind her humanity, her mortality, never seeing sunlight again, never growing old naturally, but gaining centuries, millennia perhaps, with Phelan. Time to watch his children grow, to explore the world, to live adventures she couldn't imagine. "I don't have to decide now, do I?" she asked. "No," Phelan said immediately. "This isn't a decision to rush. Take all the time you need, years if necessary. I'm not going anywhere." Helena returned to sit beside him, taking his cold hands in her warm ones. "Ask me properly." He blinked in confusion. "Ask you what?" "To marry you," Helena said with a smile. "You said you want to marry me. Ask me properly." Understanding dawned on Phelan's face, followed by something like nervousness. "I don't have a ring. I should do this properly, plan something romantic." "Just ask me," Helena interrupted. "We can do the formal proposal later." Right now, I just want to hear you ask. Phelan slid from the couch to kneel before her, still holding her hands. His crimson eyes were bright with emotion. Helena Kirby, he said softly, will you marry me? Will you be my wife, my partner, my companion for however long we have? Will you let me love you and protect you and build a life with you? Yes, Helena breathed, tears streaming down her face. Yes, Phelan, I'll marry you. He surged up to kiss her, pulling her into his arms and holding her like she was the most precious thing in existence. And in that moment, surrounded by ancient books and candlelight, Helena felt like the luckiest woman alive. She was going to marry the Vampire King. Her life had become a fairy tale, and she couldn't wait to see what happened next. The wedding was planned for October, giving them 2 months to prepare. It would be a unique ceremony, combining human and vampire traditions, held in the palace's great hall at midnight. Helena invited Emma, her best friend, who took the news of vampires existing remarkably well after the initial shock. So you're marrying a vampire king, Emma said, drinking wine in Helena's palace bedroom while they looked at wedding dresses on a laptop. Your life is insane. I know, Helena said with a laugh, but I love him, Emma. He's good to me and his children are wonderful and I've never been happier. Then I'm happy for you, Emma said warmly. Even if your fiancé is a several centuries old bloodsucker, at least he's rich and treats you well. The children were ecstatic about the wedding. They threw themselves into helping plan, offering suggestions and opinions on everything from flowers to music. Lysander volunteered to play piano during the ceremony, and Helena accepted immediately. Phelan had a ring made for her, a band of white gold with diamonds and rubies arranged in an intricate pattern. It was beautiful and unique like everything he gave her. The rubies represent my eyes, he explained as he slipped it onto her finger. So you'll always carry a part of me with you. Helena cried happy tears and kissed him until they were both breathless. The weeks flew by in a flurry of preparations. Helena continued teaching during the day, but evenings were devoted to wedding planning and spending time with Phelan. They were deliriously happy, building a future together despite all the obstacles, and Helena made her decision about the turning. I want to wait, she told Phelan one evening. Maybe a few years so I can experience more of my human life. But yes, eventually I want to be turned. I want forever with you, Phelan. I want to see what the world becomes, to watch your children grow, to explore everything with you. I don't want to die and leave you alone. Phelan held her close, his face buried in her hair. You're sure? Once it's done, it can't be undone. I'm sure, Helena said firmly. Not now, but someday, when the time is right, I want you to turn me. Then I will, Phelan promised. When you're ready, I'll give you eternity. The wedding day arrived in a flurry of excitement and nerves. Helena dressed in a gown of ivory silk, simple but elegant, with her hair swept up and the crescent moon necklace from Lucretia around her neck. Emma helped her prepare, both of them fighting back tears. You look beautiful, Emma said, adjusting Helena's veil. Like a fairy tale princess. I feel like one, Helena admitted. This whole thing still seems surreal. The ceremony was held at midnight in the palace's great hall, which had been transformed with thousands of candles and dark flowers. Vampires filled the space, members of Phelan's court dressed in their finest, and at the front, standing before an altar of black stone, was Phelan. He wore a black suit with silver accents, his white hair loose around his shoulders, and his crimson eyes locked onto Helena the moment she appeared. His expression was reverent, awestruck, as if he couldn't believe she was real. Helena walked down the aisle, Emma beside her as her maid of honor, and the children following as attendants. When she reached Phelan, he took her hands with infinite gentleness. The ceremony was conducted by Lady Seraphine, who had been given authority to perform vampire marriages by some ancient tradition Helena didn't fully understand. The words were a mix of human vows and vampire oaths, promises to love and protect and remain faithful for all their days. When it came time for Phelan to speak, his voice was steady but emotional. You walked into my life when I had given up on finding connection. You saw past what I am to who I am. You loved my children and tolerated my world and made me feel alive again after centuries of merely existing. I promise to love you, to protect you, to value your thoughts and opinions and needs. I promise to be your partner in all things. And I promise that for however long we have together, you will be treasured beyond measure. Helena's vows were simpler but no less heartfelt. Phelan, you've given me a home when I felt lost. You've trusted me with your children and your heart. You've protected me and valued me and loved me in ways I never thought possible. I promise to stand beside you, to love your children as my own, to be your partner and friend and wife. And I promise that no matter what challenges we face, I will never stop choosing you. They exchanged rings and Lady Seraphine pronounced them married. Phelan kissed her as the assembled vampires erupted in applause, and Helena felt like her heart would burst with happiness. She was married to the Vampire King, and their life together was only beginning. The reception was a lavish affair with music and dancing and blood wine for the vampires, regular wine for the few humans present. Helena danced with Phelan, with his children, with Emma, with various members of the court. She laughed and celebrated and felt more loved than she'd ever felt in her life. Late in the night, Phelan swept her away to their chambers, leaving the party continuing without them. He carried her over the threshold with a smile, setting her down gently in their bedroom. "Hello, wife," he murmured, pulling her close. "Hello, husband," Helena replied, the word feeling strange and wonderful on her tongue. They made love that night with the tenderness of new spouses and the passion of established lovers, and afterward, wrapped in each other's arms, they talked about their future. "I want to travel with you," Helena said. "See the places you've lived, the things you've experienced. I want to know your whole history. Then we'll travel," Phelan promised. "We'll visit every place I've called home. I'll show you the world through my eyes. And I'll teach your children and help with palace business and learn everything I can about being a queen." "You're already a queen," Phelan said softly. "You've been my queen since the moment I fell in love with you." Helena kissed him, pouring all her love and happiness into the gesture. She'd come to Ashwood Academy expecting a simple teaching position. Instead, she'd found a family, a purpose, and a love that would span lifetimes. Years passed in contentment. Helena taught the children during the school year and traveled with Phelan during summers, seeing the world from the perspective of a vampire king. She visited the ruins of ancient Rome, walked through Constantinople's historic sites, explored castles throughout Europe. She learned vampire history firsthand from someone who had lived it, and she grew into her role as queen, helping Phelan rule the northern territories with wisdom and compassion. She advocated for better vampire-human relations, helped establish protocols for protecting humans who worked with vampires, and became a beloved figure in the court. The children continued to thrive. They grew older in appearance as the years passed, becoming teenagers and then young adults, though they would remain forever young in vampire terms. And they all called Helena Mother, the title she'd earned through love and dedication. On her 30th birthday, 5 years after their wedding, Helena made the final decision. "I'm ready," she told Phelan. "I want to be turned now. I want forever with you." Phelan held her face in his hands, searching her eyes. "You're absolutely certain? This can't be undone, Helena." "I know," Helena said firmly. "I've had 5 years to think about it, to experience my human life. I've done everything I wanted to do as a mortal. Now I want to be with you properly as an equal for as long as we exist." "I'm ready, Phelan. Make me yours completely." The turning was done in their chambers with only Phelan present. It was intimate and painful and transformative, his bite, his venom entering her system, her human body dying and being reborn as something other. Helena woke 3 days later to a world transformed. Everything was sharper, clearer, more vivid. She could hear sounds from miles away, could smell individual scents in impossible detail. And she was strong, faster than any human, with reflexes that seemed supernatural. Phelan was there when she opened her eyes, crimson meeting crimson now. She had survived the turning. "Hello, my love," he said softly. "Welcome to eternity." Helena looked at her hands, pale and perfect now, and smiled. She was a vampire. She would never age, never die naturally. She would have centuries with Phelan, with their children, to explore and learn and love. "Thank you," she whispered, "for giving me forever." "Thank you," Phelan replied, "for choosing to spend it with me." They emerged from the chambers as equals now, king and queen, partners in every sense. The court celebrated her transformation, welcoming her fully into vampire society. And the children were thrilled to have a mother who would be with them for eternity. Helena continued teaching, now with the perspective of both human and vampire. She became an even better educator, understanding both worlds intimately, and she and Phelan ruled together, bringing wisdom and compassion to the vampire territories. They traveled the world, explored new places, and built a life filled with love and purpose. They had challenges and conflicts as any couple did, but they faced them together, and through it all their love remained constant. Decades passed, then centuries. Helena watched the world change, saw technology advance, witnessed human society transform. But through it all she had Phelan beside her, steadfast and loving. And she never regretted her choice. On the 500th anniversary of their wedding, they stood in the palace library where they'd first become friends. It was late night, the rest of the palace quiet, just the two of them surrounded by books and memories. "Do you ever miss being human?" Phelan asked, pulling Helena close. She considered the question seriously. "Sometimes," she admitted. "I miss the sun occasionally, miss the simplicity of a mortal life. But Phelan, I wouldn't trade what we have for anything. 500 years with you has been the greatest gift of my existence." 500 years, and I love you more now than I did then," Phelan said softly. "Every year with you has been a treasure, Helena. You're the best thing that ever happened to me." "We're the best thing that ever happened to each other," Helena corrected with a smile. "We saved each other, Phelan. You gave me purpose and family. I gave you connection and love. We're better together than we ever were apart." He kissed her then, tender and loving, a kiss that contained 500 years of devotion, and Helena kissed him back, grateful for the impossible love story they'd created. She'd walked into a classroom of fanged children, unaware their father was the vampire king. She'd been terrified and overwhelmed, trapped by a contract and circumstances. But that fear had transformed into friendship, which had deepened into love, which had become an eternal bond. Helena had found her place in the vampire world. She'd found her purpose in teaching and ruling. And most importantly, she'd found her soulmate in Phelan. Their story had begun with fear and suspicion. But it had transformed into something beautiful and lasting, a love that would endure through the centuries. And as they stood together in that library, surrounded by the accumulated wisdom of ages, Helena knew with absolute certainty that she'd made the right choice. She'd chosen love over fear. She'd chosen forever over safety. She'd chosen Phelan. And she would make that choice again every single day, for as long as they both existed, their love was eternal, unbreakable, and absolutely worth every challenge they'd faced. And Helena had never been happier in all her long, immortal life.